Senior xenobiologist Du1 stared at his computer screen for the fifth time that morning. He kept reading the same medical file over and over, hoping the information would somehow change. It didn't. With each review, his antenna drooped lower, and the silvery scales around his neck bristled with growing concern. "This cannot be correct," he muttered, his third eye blinking rapidly, a sign of extreme stress among his species. No living being could survive with these biological systems. The file belonged to Lee Newell, the first human transfer student to ever attend the Galactic Medical Academy. In its 1,000-year history, the Academy had hosted students from over 200 different species, but humans were relatively new to the galactic community. Their recent arrival had caused quite a stir, especially among the medical faculty. Do-1 touched his screen with a scaled finger, bringing up Newell's basic biological information. The numbers made his stomach chambers clench. Sleep cycle, 6 to 8 hours, ERRR. Value too low. Body temperature, variable. Internal regulation through liquid excretion. Skeletal structure, internal calcium-based support system. Diet type, omnivorous with voluntary toxin consumption. Regeneration rate, constant cellular renewal with enhanced trauma response. Professor Du-1. A soft voice interrupted his troubled thoughts. The new student has arrived. He looked up to see his assistant, Mireille, hovering near the door. Like most members of her gaseous species, her form shifted and swirled like morning mist, only held together by the containment field that let her interact with solid matter. "Thank you, Mireille. Please send them in." Du-1 straightened his professional robe, trying to prepare himself for what was about to walk through his door. The human that entered his office looked deceptively normal, and that's what worried Du-1 the most. Newell appeared as a bipedal creature of average height, with dark hair and what seemed to be a covering of artificial fabric over most of their body. But Du-1 knew better. Under that ordinary exterior lay biological systems that defied explanation. "Good morning, Professor," Newell said with a smile, showing off the flat teeth of an omnivore. "Thank you for meeting with me." Du-1 gestured to the chair in front of his desk, designed to accommodate various body types. "Please, sit down. We have much to discuss about your enrollment." Newell sat down with the casual ease of a species that had evolved to bend in the middle, another biological quirk that made Du-1's scales itch. Most species either had rigid bodies or multiple segments. This human's flexible spine was just the beginning of their strangeness. "I see you've traveled far to reach us," Du-1 began, noting the travel timestamps in Newell's file. "That must have been tiring." "Oh, not really," Newell replied cheerfully. "I managed to sleep on the transport, and I had some coffee when I arrived. I'm feeling pretty energetic." Du-1's third eye blinked rapidly again. There were several disturbing elements in that simple statement. First, the human had somehow restored their energy with only a few hours of sleep, when most species required at least 12 to 16 hours of rest cycles. Second, they had voluntarily consumed a known stimulant toxin, this coffee, and spoke about it as if it were normal. "I see," he said carefully, making a note in his personal data pad. "And how are you finding our atmospheric conditions? We can adjust them if needed." Newell shrugged, another unnervingly flexible movement. "It's a bit warm, but I'm just sweating a little more than usual. No big deal." Du-1 nearly dropped his data pad. The human was actively secreting cooling liquid through their skin, and they were discussing it casually. Most species would consider such fluid loss a medical emergency. "Perhaps we should begin with your medical history," Du-1 said, trying to maintain his professional composure. "I notice you've listed several previous injuries, including multiple bone fractures." "Yeah, I was pretty active as a kid." Newell laughed. "Broke my arm twice, my leg once, and a couple of ribs. Oh, and lots of sprains and bruises. But those don't really count." Du-1 felt his primary heart skip a beat, and his secondary heart had to compensate. The human was talking about catastrophic skeletal damage, as if discussing the weather. In most species, a broken support structure meant death or, at best, permanent disability. Yet this human had experienced multiple such injuries and showed no signs of impairment. And these injuries, they healed completely? He asked, already knowing the terrifying answer. Of course, the bones knit back together pretty quickly. The worst part was just being stuck in a cast and not being able to play sports for a while. Do 1 made another note. Subject discusses major trauma repair as inconvenience rather than life-threatening condition. Professor, Newell said, leaning forward with interest, I noticed in the student handbook that the cafeteria doesn't serve any spicy food. Would it be possible to bring my own hot sauce? Do 1's third eye began to throb. You wish to bring additional irritants to add to your food? Well, yes. I like my food to have a bit of kick to it. You intentionally want to add pain-inducing substances to your meals. Do 1 needed to clarify this point. Surely he was misunderstanding something. It's not really pain, Newell explained, though their explanation only made things worse. It just adds flavor, makes the food more interesting. Do 1 added another note. Subject deliberately seeks out and consumes substances that cause pain responses for enjoyment. He needed to redirect this conversation to something less disturbing. Let's discuss your class schedule. I see you've signed up for advanced xenophysiology and comparative anatomy. Yes, I'm really excited about those. On Earth, I used to help out at a veterinary clinic, so I have some experience with different species. Though I guess Earth animals are pretty different from galactic species. Do 1 wondered if he should mention that by galactic standards, Earth's animals were just as terrifying as humans. He'd seen documentation about creatures called lizards that could regrow lost limbs, and axolotls that could regenerate vital organs. The entire planet seemed to operate on different biological rules than the rest of the galaxy. Before we continue, Do 1 said, pulling up a standard form on his screen, I need to ask about your environmental requirements. What temperature range do you need for optimal functioning? Oh, I'm pretty adaptable, Newell replied. I can handle anything from about 0 to 40 degrees Celsius without too much trouble. Below 0, I just need some warm clothes, and above 40, I need to stay hydrated. Do 1 stared at the human. That temperature range was ridiculous. Most species could only tolerate variations of 2 or 3 degrees before requiring environmental suits. Yet here was this human, casually describing an ability to function across a 40-degree range through nothing more than clothing adjustments and liquid intake. And your atmospheric requirements. Standard oxygen mix is fine. I can handle higher or lower concentrations for a while if needed. Our bodies are pretty good at adapting. Adapting. That word kept coming up, and each time it did, Do 1 felt more unsettled. Humans didn't just survive, they adapted. They changed their behavior, their biology responded to new conditions, they recovered from injuries that should be fatal, and they treated it all as perfectly normal. One final question, Do 1 said, trying to keep his voice steady. Your file mentioned something called adrenaline. Could you explain this? Oh, that's just a hormone our bodies produce when we're excited or in danger, Newell explained. It gives us extra strength and speed when we need it. Helps us ignore pain too. Pretty useful in emergencies. Do 1 added one final note to his file. Subject species has evolved chemical override system to exceed normal physical limitations and suppress pain responses. Implications disturbing. Well, Newell, he said, closing his datapad, I believe we have covered the basics. Classes begin tomorrow at first light. Please remember to submit your dietary restrictions to the cafeteria staff, though I suspect your list of restrictions will be surprisingly short. Great, thanks, Professor. Oh, and don't worry too much about the dietary stuff. Humans can eat almost anything. We're very resilient. As Newell left the office, Do 1 immediately began composing a message to the Academy's medical board. They needed to update their emergency protocols. Their new human student wasn't just unusual, they were a walking collection of biological impossibilities. He started typing. Urgent. Review of human biological systems required. Subject displays following concerning characteristics. He paused, then added, warning. Following information may cause distress in medical practitioners. Prepare accordingly. Looking out his window, Do-Won watched Hae-Nul walking across the campus courtyard. The human was moving with the endless endurance of their species, despite their inefficient bipedal structure. As he observed, Hae-Nul took a drink from a container that his sensors indicated contained near-boiling liquid. Do-Won's third eye began to throb again. This was going to be a very interesting academic year, assuming he survived the stress of studying human biology. He made a mental note to stock up on calming medications. He had a feeling he would need them. The human had only been on campus for 1 hour, and they had already defied half a dozen biological constants. Do-Won couldn't help but wonder what other impossibilities they would demonstrate in the days to come. He just hoped the Academy's insurance would cover the inevitable medical emergencies, not for the human's sake, but for the other students and faculty who might witness Hae-Nul's casual defiance of biological laws. With a sigh, he added one final note to his research log. Day 1 observations suggest human biology operates on principles previously unknown to galactic science. Further study required. May the first ones protect us all. Medical instructor Park Ji-ah had performed thousands of physical assessments in her career. She had examined students from gas giants, water worlds, and even a few silicon-based life forms. But nothing in her 300 years of medical practice had prepared her for examining a human. The assessment room's white walls gleamed under bright lights as Ji-ah reviewed the initial notes from Professor Do-Won. Her 4 arms moved quickly over the medical equipment, setting up the standard diagnostic tools. Her protective scales shimmered with anxiety as she waited for the human student to arrive. Hae-Nul walked in right on time, wearing the standard medical examination garment provided by the Academy. Ji-ah noticed immediately that the human moved with surprising grace for a species with such an unstable 2-legged design. "Good morning, Instructor Park," Hae-Nul said cheerfully. "Should I sit on the examination table?" "Yes, please," Ji-ah replied, trying to hide her nervousness. She had studied human biology extensively the night before, but reading about something and seeing it in person were very different things. As Hae-Nul sat down, Ji-ah began her standard scan. The results made her outer scales flutter in disbelief. "Your internal temperature is 37 degrees Celsius," she said, double-checking the reading. "How are you not cooking from the inside?" Hae-Nul looked confused. "That's normal for humans. Our bodies maintain that temperature pretty consistently." Ji-ah's medical training kicked in, helping her stay professional despite her shock. "And you say this temperature is maintained through liquid expulsion through your skin? You mean sweating?" "Yes, that's how we cool down. When we get too hot, we sweat, and when the sweat evaporates, it cools us off." Ji-ah made a note. Subject describes controlled liquid loss as normal thermal regulation. She had to remind herself that this was not a medical emergency, no matter how much it looked like one. "Let's check your skeletal structure," she said, moving on to the bone density scanner. The image that appeared on her screen made her gasp. "Is something wrong?" Hae-Nul asked. "Your support structure, it's internal." Ji-ah knew this fact from her reading, but seeing it was different. "And these marks here." She pointed to several slight irregularities in the bone scans. "Oh, those are from old breaks," Hae-Nul explained. "They're completely healed now. Bones actually grow back stronger where they break." Ji-ah had to sit down. "You're telling me your support structure not only repairs itself, but becomes more durable after damage?" "Well, yeah. Doesn't everyone's?" "No," Ji-ah said firmly. "No, they do not. Most species die if their support structure breaks. The few that survive never fully recover." Hae-Nul looked genuinely surprised by this information. "Really? But how do they handle accidents?" They don't. They die. Jaya tried to move past this disturbing topic. Let's check your cardiovascular system. She pressed a sensor against Haynul's chest and nearly dropped it when she heard the rhythmic beating. Your fluid pump, your heart, it never stops. Nope. Beats from before we're born until we die. Jaya made another note. Constant muscular movement for entire lifespan, apparently normal. She was beginning to understand why Professor Duwan had seemed so disturbed after his meeting with the human. Now, I need to check your reflexes, Jaya said, picking up a small hammer with one of her 4 hands. She tapped Haynul's knee, and the leg kicked out automatically. Fascinating. Your nervous system maintains constant readiness for rapid response. I guess so. We don't really think about it much. Jaya moved on to the strength assessment. Please grip this device with your dominant hand. Haynul complied, and the reading made Jaya's scales ripple in surprise. This can't be right. The power-to-mass ratio. Is it too low? Haynul asked. Too high, Jaya corrected. For your muscle mass, you should not be able to generate this much force. And you say humans can become even stronger. Oh yeah. With exercise, we can build a lot more muscle. Some humans can lift several times their own body weight. Jaya added another note. Voluntary enhancement of physical capabilities through controlled damage and repair of muscular tissue. The examination continued, and with each new test, Jaya's understanding of biology was further challenged. The human's digestive system could process an impossibly wide range of materials. Their immune system actively sought out and remembered threats. Their skin could repair itself without scaring for minor wounds. One more test, Jaya said, bringing out a small device. This will measure your pain response threshold. Okay. Haynul agreed easily. But you should know that pain tolerance varies a lot among humans. Jaya pressed the device against Haynul's arm and activated it. The human showed no reaction until the device was at a level that would have incapacitated most species. Did you feel that? Jaya asked. A little. It was like a mild pinch. Jaya stared at her readings. A mild pinch. This level of stimulus should have triggered an immediate pain response. Oh, that's nothing, Haynul said with a shrug. One time during a sports game, I played for an hour before realizing I had a broken finger. Adrenaline is pretty amazing stuff. Jaya put down her instruments and took a moment to collect herself. Haynul, I need you to understand something. Your species' ability to ignore pain, while remarkable, is not normal. Pain exists to prevent further damage. But sometimes you need to push through the pain, Haynul said, as if this were obvious. Like when you're running a marathon, or need to get help after an accident, or... Please stop, Jaya interrupted. I need to update your medical file, and I want to be very clear about this. She began typing. Subject displays following concerning characteristics. Maintains lethal internal temperature through controlled fluid loss. Support structure self-repairs and strengthens after damage. Cardiovascular system operates continuously without rest. Capable of voluntary physical enhancement. Pain response can be partially or fully suppressed. Shows no concern about above conditions. Looking at Haynul, who was now swinging their legs casually off the edge of the examination table, Jaya felt a mix of horror and fascination. Here was a being whose very existence challenged everything she knew about biology. You may go now, she said. But please, try to avoid demonstrating any of these abilities in front of other students. The last thing we need is a mass panic when they realize what humans are capable of. I'll try, Haynul promised, standing up. But I can't help some things like sweating or healing. Yes. Well, just try not to break any bones or ignore life-threatening injuries in public. After Haynul left, Jia sent an urgent message to the Academy's medical board, copying Professor Duwan. Urgent update needed for human medical protocols. Standard emergency responses may be inadequate or inappropriate. Key concerns. What appears fatal may be survivable. What appears survivable may be ignored entirely. Subject can and will continue functioning despite conditions that would terminate other species. Traditional pain response indicators unreliable. Recommend establishing new baseline for human medical emergencies. She added a personal note at the end. Warning. Examining human biology may cause existential crisis in medical professionals. Suggest adding psychology services to medical staff support. Jaya looked at her instruments, still displaying Hain-Newell's test results. The numbers seemed to mock everything she had learned in 3 centuries of medical practice. She decided she needed a strong drink, something that would be toxic to humans. Then she remembered that humans intentionally consumed toxic substances for pleasure and decided she needed to lie down instead. Perhaps after a few days of rest, the universe would start making sense again. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't. Humans had arrived in the galactic community, and with them came the disturbing revelation that everything they thought they knew about biology might be wrong. Nan Yunseo sat in the academy cafeteria, his crystalline body reflecting the morning light in rainbow patterns across the table. As a silicon-based life form, he didn't need to eat often. Once every 30 days was plenty. But he enjoyed watching other species during their mealtimes. It was a good way to learn about different cultures. Today, however, he was watching something that made his crystal lattice structure vibrate with anxiety. The human student, Hain-Newell, had just sat down at a nearby table with a food tray that violated several laws of chemistry. "Excuse me," Yunseo said, his translator crystal pulsing with each word, "but are you aware that you have both oxidizing and reducing compounds on your tray?" Hain-Newell looked up from their breakfast with a friendly smile. "Oh, hi. You mean the orange juice and the cereal?" "Yeah, I like to have both." At the same time, Yunseo's crystalline structure flickered with concern. "Won't they react inside you?" "That's kind of the point," Hain-Newell explained, taking a bite of cereal. "Our digestive system uses different chemicals to break down different types of food. It all works together." Yunseo watched in horrified fascination as Hain-Newell continued eating. The human was consuming plant matter, processed grains, and animal products all in the same meal. Even more disturbing, they were washing it all down with citric acid. Other students began to notice as well. A group of gaseous beings drifted further away from Hain-Newell's table, their containment fields humming with nervousness. A few insectoid students clicked their mandibles in distress. Then Hain-Newell did something that caused actual screaming. From their bag, they pulled out a small red bottle. The label read "Extra Hot Sauce." Warning: extremely spicy. With casual disregard for safety, Hain-Newell began adding drops of this suspicious substance to their food. "Emergency," called out one of the methane-breathing students. "The human is contaminating their food with toxins." The cafeteria's safety systems activated immediately. Warning lights flashed, and protective barriers began rising between the tables. Medical drones zoomed toward Hain-Newell's location, their sensors already scanning for chemical weapons. Wait. Hain-Newell held up their hands. "It's just hot sauce. It's food." Professor Du-Won rushed into the cafeteria, followed closely by Instructor Park Jia. They had both been expecting something like this, though perhaps not quite so soon. "Everyone remain calm," Du-Won announced, his 3 eyes blinking in sequence. "This is not an emergency. The human is merely seasoning their food." "But Professor," Yunseo's crystal voice rang out, "our sensors detect capsaicin. That's a defense chemical that plants evolved to prevent being eaten." "Yes," Jaya stepped in, her scales shimming with professional calm. "And humans eat it for pleasure." She still couldn't say this without her voice wavering slightly. The cafeteria fell silent. Every being tried to process this information. A few students had to extend their support structures to avoid collapsing. Perhaps Du-1 suggested gently to Hanul, you could explain your dietary preferences to your fellow students. It might help reduce the panic. Hanul nodded, putting down their spoon. Well, humans are omnivores. We can eat lots of different things. Plants, animals, fungi, even some minerals like salt. And we like variety in our flavors. But the burning sensation, one gaseous student wobbled in their containment field. It's pain. Yeah, but good pain, Hanul tried to explain. Like how some people enjoy really cold drinks or fizzy sodas, it adds excitement to the meal. The cafeteria staff had gathered now, watching the situation with professional interest. The head chef, a tall arachnoid named Gaiho, stepped forward on his 8 legs. Perhaps, he suggested, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully, we should create a separate human-safe menu to prevent future misunderstandings. That might be wise, Du-1 agreed. Though I suspect the bigger challenge will be explaining what humans can't eat. The list of substances toxic to humans seems remarkably short compared to other species. Hanul brightened at this. Oh, that's right. I brought some chocolate for everyone to try. No. Du-1, Jia, and Jaiho all shouted at once. While your gesture is kind, Jia explained quickly, theobromine is lethal to many species, as is caffeine and alcohol, all of which humans consume regularly. The cafeteria erupted in confused chittering, gaseous wobbling, and crystalline vibrations as the students tried to understand this new information. Let me get this straight, Yuncio said, his crystal structure glowing with concentration. Humans can eat both acids and bases. Yes, Hanul confirmed. And both oxidizing and reducing compounds. Yes. And defensive plant chemicals. They make food more interesting. And literal poisons. Well, some of them. In moderation. Like coffee. Jaiho's mandibles clicked rapidly as he made notes on his datapad. So for the human menu, we need food that is not too safe, contains some mild toxins, might cause pain, could be fatal to other species, but won't kill the human, probably. Hanul grinned. Now you're getting it. Oh, and could you add some really spicy options? The head chef's compound eyes blinked in sequence. You want us to make it more dangerous. Just more flavorful, Hanul corrected, though I brought my own hot sauce just in case. Speaking of which, Du-1 interrupted. Perhaps you could put that away for now. Some of our more sensitive students are beginning to crystallize from stress. Hanul looked around, noticing that several crystalline students, including Yuncio, had developed nervous growth patterns in their structures. The gaseous students had condensed to half their normal size, and the insectoid students' exoskeletons were showing stress colors. Sorry, everyone, Hanul said, putting the hot sauce back in their bag. I didn't mean to scare anyone. How about I give a presentation about human dietary habits? It might help explain things. Du-1's third eye twitched. Perhaps we should wait until after the current panic subsides, and maybe have medical staff present, and stress counselors. As the cafeteria slowly returned to normal, Jaiho gathered his kitchen staff for an emergency meeting. They had to completely rethink their understanding of food safety. Everything they knew about toxic compounds, chemical reactions, and digestive compatibility had to be reconsidered. Meanwhile, Hanul finished their breakfast, completely unaware that they had just violated 17 different food safety protocols and demonstrated the ability to safely digest compounds that would kill most other species. Yuncio, still watching from his table, made a new entry in his stenobiology notes. Humans, the species that ate death, and called it spicy. Professor Du-1, seeing that the situation was under control, headed back to his office. He needed to update the Academy's chemical safety protocols. Again, he also made a note to schedule a meeting about human medical waste disposal. He had a feeling that would be the next major shock to the Academy's systems. After all, Any species that could eat nearly anything probably had some interesting ways of processing it all. But that was a crisis for another day. For now, he just hoped Newell wouldn't introduce their fellow students to the concept of extra spicy anytime soon. Unfortunately, in Newell's bag, right next to the extra hot sauce, was a bottle labeled Super Ultra Maximum Heat, use with extreme caution. Tomorrow was another day, and humans, it seemed, were always ready to push the boundaries of what was biologically possible. Professor Duwan sat in his office, surrounded by data pads and holographic displays. After 3 months of observing the human student Newell, he was finally ready to publish his research paper. His 3 eyes were tired from reviewing endless notes, but he knew this work could change galactic science forever. The title glowed on his main screen: Humans, the Biological Impossibility. Professor, Mayray's misty form drifted through the doorway. The Academy Board is ready for your presentation. Do-One gathered his materials and headed to the main lecture hall. News of his research had spread quickly, and the room was packed with scientists from across the galaxy. He saw crystalline beings, gaseous forms, insectoids, and even a few energy-based life forms floating near the ceiling. In the front row sat Newell, looking perfectly normal despite being the subject of the most controversial research paper in the Academy's history. Next to them sat Instructor Park Jia and Nan Yunseo, both still maintaining a safe distance from the humans' unpredictable biology. Do-One activated the main display and began his presentation. Distinguished colleagues, he started, his scales shifting nervously. Today I present my findings on human biology, a subject that challenges everything we thought we knew about life in our galaxy. The first image appeared, a basic human anatomical diagram. Several audience members flinched at the sight of the internal skeleton. Let us begin with their basic structure. Humans are endoskeletal beings with a calcium-based support system. This alone is not unique. What is unprecedented is their ability to repair catastrophic skeletal damage. He showed a series of X-rays from Newell's medical history. These images show multiple complete breaks in the support structure. In any other species, these would be fatal injuries. In humans, they are considered minor inconveniences. Murmurs spread through the audience. A few of the gaseous beings condensed slightly in distress. But this is merely the beginning. Do-One continued. Consider their temperature regulation system. The next slide showed thermal imaging of Newell during various activities. Humans maintain an internal temperature of approximately 37 degrees Celsius, a temperature that would cook most species from the inside. They achieve this through a process they call sweating. Several scientists took notes, their appendages shaking slightly. When their temperature rises, they expel water through specialized skin glands. The evaporation of this water cools their bodies. Yes, you heard correctly. They intentionally lose water to maintain temperature. An arachnoid scientist raised a leg. But the water loss. They replace it by drinking more water, Do-One explained. They can process and replace lost fluids within hours. Some humans can lose up to 12% of their body weight in water and survive. The arachnoid's legs slowly lowered as they processed this information. Next, we must discuss their sleep cycles. Do-One showed a graph of Newell's brain activity. Humans require only 6 to 8 hours of sleep per day. They remain conscious and active for the other 16 to 18 hours. A crystalline scientist's structure began to crack from stress. Medical drones quickly applied a stabilizing field. Furthermore, Do-One continued, they can survive on even less sleep for extended periods. Their bodies will eventually force them to rest, but they can fight this urge for days if necessary. He moved to the next topic. Their dietary capabilities are perhaps the most disturbing aspect of human biology. The cafeteria's head chef, Gai-Ho, clicked his mandibles in agreement. He had spent the last 3 months trying to create meals that were somehow both safe and interesting for human consumption. Humans are omnivores of unprecedented flexibility. They can digest plant and animal matter, process both acids and bases, and even consume substances specifically evolved to cause pain. Do-One paused. They call these substances spices and actively seek them out. He showed footage from the cafeteria incident. Several audience members had to look away. But perhaps most remarkable is their response to physical trauma. Do-One displayed a series of medical scans. Humans not only survive injuries that would kill most species, but they actively use controlled damage to become stronger. Newell nodded enthusiastically from the front row. They had recently started teaching a few brave students about the human concept of working out. When humans deliberately damage their muscles through repeated strain, the tissues repair themselves and become more powerful. They call this process exercise and consider it normal behavior. The energy beings near the ceiling flickered in distress. Their immune system is equally aggressive. Instead of avoiding threats, human immune responses actively seek out and remember dangerous substances. They can even deliberately introduce weakened pathogens into their bodies to strengthen these responses. They call this vaccination. Do-One took a moment to let his audience recover before delivering his most shocking findings. But the truly unprecedented aspect of human biology is their pain response system. Humans can not only survive extreme pain, they can choose to ignore it. He played a recording from Newell's physical assessment. As you can see, the subject remained functional at pain levels that would incapacitate most species. They describe this ability as mind over matter and can enhance it through chemical responses they call adrenaline. The lecture hall had grown very quiet. Even the gaseous beings had stopped their usual subtle movements. In conclusion, Do-One said, "Humans appear to violate numerous biological constants we once thought universal. They survive fatal damage, ignore debilitating pain, consume toxins for pleasure, and deliberately damage themselves to become stronger." He showed his final slide, a list of standard biological laws that human existence seemed to contradict. However, he continued, "I do not believe humans are actually defying biological law. Rather, they represent a completely different approach to survival. Where most species evolve to avoid damage, humans evolve to endure it. Where we evolve to flee from pain, they evolve to embrace it. Where we evolve specific dietary requirements, they evolve to eat almost anything." Newell raised their hand. "Professor, is that why everyone got so worried when I mentioned I like doing extreme sports?" "Yes," Do-One replied wearily. "Most species do not voluntarily seek out activities that might damage their bodies. But that's the fun part." Newell protested, causing several audience members to shift away from them. "And that," Do-One concluded, "is perhaps the most remarkable aspect of human biology. They have not only evolved to survive what should be fatal, they have evolved to enjoy it." The presentation ended to stunned silence, broken only by Newell's enthusiastic applause. As the audience filed out, many were already sending messages to their homeworlds, warning them about the species that treated death-defying feats as entertainment. Later that day, Do-One added one final note to his research. "The true mystery of human biology may not be how they survive the impossible, but why they constantly seek it out. Further research required, preferably from a safe distance." Newell stopped by his office that evening. "Great presentation, Professor. By the way, some of us are going skydiving this weekend. Want to come?" Do-One's three eyes blinked in perfect synchronization. "I think I'll stay here and update the Academy's safety protocols." Again, as Newell left, whistling cheerfully, Do-One couldn't help but wonder what other biological impossibilities humans would demonstrate tomorrow. But one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same now that these fascinating, terrifying beings had joined the galactic community. And somewhere in the Academy's cafeteria, Guy-Ho was still trying to figure out how to make food spicy enough for a human without accidentally creating a chemical weapon. It was going to be a long academic year.